At PewTalk Podcast, we know that faith starts in the home. We also know that it can be difficult to take what we hear on Sunday and live it out in our homes the rest of the week. That's because information alone doesn't lead to growth and change. But information that's reflected on and put into practice is much more likely to lead to growth and change. Join us as we hear God's Word, reflect on it, and give practical starting points to help you live out your faith in your family and in your community.
We're a bunch of weirdos today.
Hi.
It's been a while.
It's been a while since
It's Paul and the Gerbs.
it's been a while since the Gerbses have been on.
It feels like a while.
Well, yeah, we weren't on last week because BBS.
Yep.
And we weren't, and you guys weren't on because vacation.
Yep.
And but we were.
Yep.
We were on.
Yep.
We had special guests. Hoyer.
Hoyer. Yep. Would be Hewer, as it looks on the letterage.
Hewer.
Huey? Hewer?
And Arathki.
Rathk. As our my so my
Proxy.
my vehicle when I have voice commands, it actually goes through the vehicle, not through the phone. So like the vehicle downloads and it's got a little lady that talks to it. And so like
What?
a lady that talks to her. So like if I say call Stacy Gerber, she'll respond with like calling Stacy Gerber. But with Rathke, it's calling Greg Rathk.
No E.
No E. And then calling Dan Hooer.
Hewer.
No, not Hewer. Hooer. Like
There's some funny ones.
yeah.
I
wonder what
calling
Julie
pop sheets. Oh, yeah, what would
calling
Julie
pop
be?
sheets.
That'd be a fun one.
You have a friend, Stacy has a friend whose last name is basically magician, but said like magician. Yeah, spell it.
S-Z-Y-N.
Yeah.
There's one vowel. Magician. I don't know
I bet
what
you.
it says.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
bet
remember.
Siri has a
We'll
hard time
call
with that.
Julie. We'll call you on our way home.
Yep.
You know what's funny is that I have the British voice for
Mhm.
my Siri. So
Yeah.
every time it reads something to me and it says schedule, it'll say schedule.
Yeah.
Schedule. Today on your schedule, you have.
It's like a personal assistant.
It is. Well, I as I said before, when I was doing my schoolwork and all that, I would have Siri read back my papers because I could audibly hear and I could hear punctuation. I could hear how I was phrasing it, but it sounded so much better because it was read by a British voice.
Nice.
So therefore, if you ever want to sound smart, just have your stuff you write read by a British, because it'll make your email sound like, man, I'm really intelligent, and then read later and go, man, I'm an idiot.
The only
go.
thing that changed was the
Brits.
accent.
The accent.
The accent.
Yeah. We were talking about accents today.
At work?
Yeah. But it had to do with Southern versus New England.
My fly fishing instructor this weekend was from Texas.
Did
Mm.
they have a
Kept
draw?
calling me ma'am, like you're younger than me, son. Just don't call me ma'am.
I like how you just snuck that in there. My fly fishing guide.
Fly fishing this weekend.
Did you do this whole thing?
No, that's like advanced technique.
Oh.
So it's not like the back and forth and back and forth.
Well, so what did you do? Explain to the people who are not
So you hold
watching.
your pole back.
You gotta remember, most people, a lot of people are gonna listen to
one
this.
side, and then you spot where you want to throw it. You don't want to be right in the middle of the current. You want to be close because that's where the trout are swimming upstream. So you want to flick your wrist and smack it over.
Smack it in
And
the
then
head. I smack you.
Smack your line down, and then the bobber kind of slowly floats. You're supposed to, as soon as you see any movement on the bobber, like you have to set your hook. I was really bad at that. Set your hook.
So did you catch any salmon?
I caught trout.
How many trout did you catch? You only showed me one picture.
I caught 3.
You caught 3?
I had several more that I couldn't quite set the hook fast enough, so they got away. There was another one that I had, but when I set my hook, I set it like backwards instead of to the side. So I set it, and it came out of the water and nearly smacked me in the face. And I shrieked, and I dropped everything, and the fish got away. So that was my fly fishing experience.
This is
my
in
angler just
Colorado?
laughed at me. This was in Estes Park. Yep.
Estes Park.
Estes Park.
Yep.
I went to Estes Park once.
It's beautiful.
It's
I
been a
haven't
long
in
time since
time.
I've
Well,
been
in
to Estes Park.
2009, or maybe, yeah. So Lori and I went out there for the Red Sox game 4 for the World Series against the Rockies,
Oh, in Denver.
and it was
And
and they won the game 4 and 4 games. So therefore, it was the last game. We were planning on going to game 5 if there was going to be a game 5, but there wasn't. And so the next day we're like, hey, let's go up to Estes Park. We've never been there before in October. And we went up there, and there was elk walking everywhere, and nobody's there because it was like the end of their tourist season. So the stores were open, kind of, and you walk in and they look at you like, "What are you doing here?
Are you tourists? Who are you?
Why are you here?"
So the instructor said their season is like, I don't think all of May, but May through October. He works 7 days a week, and he gets to work at 5 a.m. and we were his last one at 6 p.m. We were done. So that's like his
That's a
whole,
long
like
time.
all through October.
I don't feel like
Maybe
that's
halfway
good
through
Sabbath
October.
rest.
October. Well,
October.
yeah. But he said the rest of the year his schedule is different. So
Yeah, but May to October is longer than my tax season, so
Yeah.
that's pretty.
yeah, 7 days
yeah.
a week. Yeah.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah. But that's the tourist season, and he said to make a living, you have to. If he didn't work that much, he wouldn't be able to
And that's
pay
Estes,
the bills.
That's
That was
Estes Park.
Estes.
Estes. No, so we couldn't go. Like we drove up as far as we could in the mountains, but then they had a certain part that they shut down. Even at that point, it wasn't.
It was
really-
snowy. And
It wasn't yet. At least when we went up there, because it was nice out. The interesting part about that whole deal is that we got a motel several miles outside of Denver, and all the people there are all for the game. And we met these couple that were Red Sox fans. They're like, hey, well, we were going to get a taxi in or something, and they're like, oh, well, just come with us. We'll drive you in. And then we're like, oh, fine, it's fine. We can get a taxi home, or whatever. This is before Uber. And we get into town, and we say bye to the couple and everything, and we go off. And so after the game, we're celebrating with all the other Red Sox fans because all Colorado fans went away. and everybody's like, hey, we're going down to this bar. But that's owned. The sister bar is owned by the guy that lives in Boston. So we're going down to this bar, and we walk in, and we're getting drinks. We go up to the roof, and there and behold is that couple that we came in. And they're like, hey, we're going home. We're going home too. And so I just remember that because Seinfeld was on when I walked in. It was on the screen, and I went, oh, Seinfeld.
Hey.
And so, we ended up just going home with the same couple that
There you go.
well, going home. I mean, we're going back to the hotel.
Yeah.
And it was pretty funny because we're like, we never thought we'd see them again.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey.
we know you.
That was my, and then the next day we drove to Estes Park.
Yeah.
And got hit by an elk. No, just kidding. We ate an elk.
You ate
Oh.
an elk.
Yeah, we had an elk burger.
Nice.
How'd it taste?
Elky.
Okay. Yeah, when I go to the mountains, I don't breathe.
I know.
So,
Well, you're not in the right mountains.
oh,
Anything with that, yeah.
Well, okay.
high
So I grew up in
altitude,
New England. New England has the White Mountains, the Green Mountains in Vermont. They have a Appalachian Trail that goes all the way.
Yeah.
But the tallest mountain in New Hampshire is like, what, 62,000 feet or something?
yeah. You're right. When I go to the mountains, Stacy's like, "Let's go to Breckenridge."
9,600.
Well, you guys start off already a mile high, and it's just
Yeah.
like we're already, we're starting at sea level. Imagine that. And so 62. I mean, there are older mountains out in Appalachians, but you guys, it's
Yeah,
taller
you do
out.
better there.
But you were
You're
already
okay in Denver. You do okay.
Yeah, I'm fine in Denver.
We were one seat below the Ohio Mile because they had that purple line that goes around.
Oh yeah.
We were one row below that.
Below that.
That's the seat. Well, of course,
Not
we were
quite a mile.
We weren't quite nosebleeds, but we were.
Yeah.
We were getting nosebleeds.
Yeah. So, but the beauty of the mountains is they're just so monumental. They're majestic and awesome and grand.
Wow, transition.
Do.
I really wish I had a transition like sound.
Transition.
I'm gonna clip that out. Transition.
Smooth.
So, Stacy,
Very
you weren't
smooth.
in church on Sunday.
I was not.
What did we talk about?
Monuments.
Oh yeah. No, you were
Things.
you were in Colorado
I was in
for
Colorado. It was a women's retreat. The goal of the retreat was to take space and to take time.
Take up space.
To take space from life, the busy pace of life, to create space for time with God. So we did some things, but we also had a lot of quiet, a lot of time for prayer and rest and contemplation. So
Did it sound like this?
no, it sounded like our cabin was right outside the river, which was like rushing. If I could pull up the video, but I don't know that would work. So really it sounded like water crashing was the soundtrack.
If Lacey were here, she would have a
Lacey
great
would be able to
soundtrack
do it.
for that.
I can't do it.
That's fine.
It was a very loud river.
Probably make us have to pee or something. So yeah. Anyway, so what was the main? I mean, your reaction to this? I mean, you went to this specifically for that, or you had this plan and didn't know what it was going to be?
I knew that it was a retreat for space. I didn't know the details of all we were going to do. We knew where to come. We knew the goal of the ministry, but we didn't know the details of the weekend. So they kind of surprised us with it. Part of that too was intentional and just trust. We'll take care of you. We'll take care. There's the water rushing.
Here you go.
Kind of like that, but louder.
Today's sound is brought to you by.
I didn't know that was going to happen, but
Sponsored sounds, nature sounds.
All of our relaxing sounds.
yeah,
Anchored
that's
in
great. Go
There we
away.
go.
or two.
How do you?
What is going on? Stop.
That failed.
Apparently, I can't have just water.
To have the ads.
So, okay. So, was that monumental in your life?
I think it will be. Yeah, it was very impactful. It was necessary. I just had been feeling very overwhelmed by life and things lately, and it's hard for me to really get away. And even when help me re-examine my rest too. What do I do when I feel like I'm really tired? What do I do, and does it really help? And the things that I'd been doing weren't actually very restful. So help me re-examine. Now I do feel rested and refreshed. So how can I build that into our everyday life? So one of my favorite things that I think we could probably implement at home, at least myself, but I think the kids might like it too, was it's called Lectio. What did I call it? Lectio Divina?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Divine lectionary.
Which is
Divine
like
reading.
divine reading. So it was, it's just so cool.
This sound kind of makes me want to pee, but how about this one?
That's
better?
more like it, yep.
Okay, so I'll just leave
the
this on
sound.
the whole
Okay.
time.
So just relax by the river. So one morning they had set up yoga mats, and they had us lay down and close our eyes, and one of the leaders led us through some breathing exercises, and then she put on some background, like kind of like when you get a massage or you go to yoga and they have that background music. And then she just read a couple portions. Most of it was from Job, very slowly, and then you can meditate on God's word, focus on your breathing, and it was just so relaxing. And a couple phrases then stuck out to me throughout the day that I kind of meditated on, and just a good way to start the day. Like I felt like I was centered, like I was calm, just focused on God's word, prepared me for the day. So I think that's something that I want to try and do more regularly.
With water.
with the water in the background. They actually had to close the windows because the water was so loud. Yes. It was distracting.
You're like, listen to this word of God.
Oh man.
So I was glad that it's been warm here because I saw all this water rushing down the Big Thompson River and realizing that that's what goes into the Platte River and that's what caused all of our flooding issues a few years ago. And
So that's what you brought up in your head when you were there trying to relax.
oh, yeah. Well, not at that point, but yes, at one point. Yeah.
What a weird
Like,
thing.
this is where, but that's where all the water came from. And I didn't realize that at first. So because we had ice on our river, all that water rushing in, I keep putting my hand here. And
Yeah,
it's like,
I'm
your
just-
face. I'm sorry.
Yep.
That's what all that extra water came in when our river was still ice.
I was there.
And yeah, but that's where it came
It
from.
didn't sound like this, though.
No, it
Nope.
was like breaking ice, cracking, and yep.
Huh.
Yeah.
So do you feel...
I'm a new woman. So centered.
But you're a big mountain goer.
Yes, I love the mountains. And part of they wanted us, they had different things that could help us remember and recall, like, this is your rest. Let's have some things like monuments. And they actually talked about the same scriptures that you read this weekend about
We actually
establishing
talked
those.
ahead of time.
You'll probably,
Yes,
you said.
I'm
"This
gonna
is
talk
what
about this,
preaching
tell
on,
my
make
wife."
sure my wife hears it.
Yeah.
But talked about what are some things we can establish as monuments in our lives that help us recall and remember these times with God, that we can remember the mountaintop experiences, literally and figuratively. So they had these different sizes of quartz cut out. I don't know if you can see it, but I chose
I'll make it
one.
bigger.
I chose one that kind of looked like a mountain, reminded me of a mountain, so that I can set it on my dresser and look at it and remember my time. It's going to be pretty. And I showed Bennett today, and his eyes got, Bennett loves rocks. He's like, that rock's amazing, Mom. I'm like, this is my rock. Please do not take my rock. So
He'll
this
take it
was,
with
I mean,
him
it
to
was
school.
perfect.
Just leave it in his
I
backpack.
know. But it just will
Yeah.
remind me now of my time there and what I learned and remembered and how I felt and monuments.
And the way that you feel, I think, is one of the specific, looking back and that reminder of the way you felt. Stacy and I went on vacation. We went down to Mexico with our family, with Stacy's family. And that morning I was like, oh, I need a book. Cause I didn't want to be on my phone. I was just going to shut it off. And I wanted a book. And so I ran to my office because I'd just taken the book that I wanted to read. I'd just taken it back to my office. Couldn't find it. I was annoyed. So I was looking around, and there was another book that I'd bought that was further down on my list. I mean, it was close. It was getting there, but I wanted to finish this other book first. But I'm like, whatever, I'll grab this book. And it's called The Other Half of the Church by Jim Wilder and Michael Hendricks. It's a book that one of my leadership classes has recommended. And so I was looking at it. It's basically, the subtitle is Christian Community, Brain Science, and Overcoming Spiritual Stagnation. So it's using brain science to talk about discipleship. And so it's a very slow read because, I mean, it's not dense, but it takes a lot to process it. But one of the big things it talks about is that the right side of our brain thinks and reacts faster than the left side of our brain. The left side of our brain is that cognitive, analytical side of the brain. And so everything goes through the right side of the brain and then back, around the right side of the brain, back around through the left side of the brain. But the right side of the brain fires faster. It's your natural reaction stuff. And so in discipleship, when we talk about if we just do it as if you knew more, if you understood the Bible better, if you understood the 10 Commandments better, that would change your behavior. The problem is it's not that's a left side brain activity, and the left side of the thinking through morality, thinking through, oh, the Bible says I shouldn't do this, so I'm not going to do it. That's a left side, that cognitive process. Right side is more instinctual It's more relational, but it happens faster. And so that feeling that you're talking about. So I was reading through some of that today, especially talking about joy and increasing our capacity for joy. And they were talking about nonverbal gratitude. And so like one of the exercises to increase joy capacity, increase your ability to have joy even in hard times, is to go back to these mountaintop type experiences and just spend 5 minutes a day, just thinking back to those, imagining that you were there, and then asking yourself 2 questions. And those 2 questions are, what did you feel in your body? Right? Was it maybe peace or a lightness? It doesn't matter about, what did you feel? And what might God be communicating to you through that memory or through that peace that you feel? And so, but if we have those monuments, if we have those things that we can see at and are immediately transplanted back to a place of peace, or immediately transplanted back to a place of excitement or a thrill or whatever that is, as we see those automatically build nonverbal gratitude in us. Because I don't have to say, oh God, thank you for this. I can just see it and automatically be transported back to that and
You experience it again.
re-experience it, and then ultimately grow my sense of peace and joy because I'm re-experiencing something that God took me through, or God allowed for me to happen, that was this mountaintop experience. That's what those monuments can do, is as we see them automatically, we don't have to think about them. It causes something to happen in us. And that's a right brain activity that happens. And so I am a third of the way in through the book, so I got a lot more work to do, a lot more reading to do. But even just considering how we can use, and they're not saying only feeling, right? It's not, don't go to the other side where all we do is it's all feeling, but to increase joy. And then the next chapter is about chesed. That's a Hebrew word. I just like to say it like that, just for your joy, Paul.
Thanks.
Yep. But to be able to just grow in these different areas, because their main premise is that as Christians, a lot of times we're trying to grow fruit in depleted soil. So soil that's not filled with joy or peace or hesed or love, but it's soil that's kind of going through the motions. So how do we replenish our soil so that the fruit can grow? And so I just got through joy, and I thought it was really interesting as I was reading through that today, this conversation about the nonverbal gratitude and the connection with the monuments, that we don't have to write it down. We can just see, you can look at that rock and automatically be transported back to that moment, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you've got your rock?
Got my rock.
What are some of those big moments?
Well, okay, so I was listening to these because I've hiked on many mountains. I've told the story of when I went on the Appalachian Trail. I've talked about that one moment when I was sitting at after being on there for a week and a half, going to this one part with the crystal clear lake that looked like a mirror, and having that one moment of peace for 5 milliseconds but I don't find that the visual representation is what brings me to that point. It is very much a musical based, and the monuments could be the music that was there at the time, or and yes, and sometimes it's not Christian music, but sometimes just stuff. I know, imagine that.
I know, yeah.
But just stuff that at that moment was, and then of course, because the olfactory sense, the nose, the sense, the smell, the olfactory sense is actually hardwired into your memory center of your brain. It's like the only sense that's actually hardwired there.
Yep.
That smell actually brings back memories instantaneously versus other things.
Yep.
And so sometimes that kind of like I that whiff of whatever will bring back memories like that. I don't know if I have anything that I sit there and hold and go, I remember this. Of course, you sit there and you look at wedding bands and you look at, maybe wedding album, those kind of things, and think of those days, when you married your wife and you had that. But we're talking specifically about moments with God.
Well, not necessarily, because God was present in your wedding, right? Like,
one would hope.
And so it doesn't have to be like, oh, I had this, Thin Spaces is a book that your program that I've read, and it's about these places where God and life kind of collide, where there's a thin barrier between us and God is kind of how they talk about it. And so it's not like, oh, this was a holy moment and it was just me and God. But really it's that question of how do we see God at work in these spots? And I like this quote from a different book called Joyful Journeying that says, when we keep practicing gratitude, whether that's verbal or nonverbal, but when we keep practicing gratitude with God, our brain remembers what our connection with him was like, making it easier for us to find our way back to him. Gratitude is the first step in building joy into our lives and helps us experience a more consistent attachment to God. And so like a wedding, as you can look back on that and even be transplanted back to that day and feel what you felt, still remembering God's presence and his, the only reason you met your wife was because God closed other doors and sent you to Kansas, and right, like, so all these things played out to get you to that day that God was very obviously in charge of.
Yeah.
And so being able to even go back to a wedding day, but have gratitude to God for that. That's what then, at least according to this, builds joy and builds that joy container, joy tank that we can go back to in those times of struggle.
Well, because I keep on going back to the music part of this all, because I keep on thinking of the soundtrack of your life kind of mentality.
Yeah.
But when I was on the Appalachian Trail during that time, I had one, and this is how old I am, I had one cassette tape.
Yeah.
And Walkman.
It was a Walkman, yes. And it was the Beatles' Abbey Road album. It was the only album that I had during that trip, and I probably listened to that album 60 billion times. And so I can't not think of that time whenever that album or a song from that album comes on. Yeah. I can even get to a point that, like, this specific song, there was a specific moment in that hike that that song was on, and I'm like, wow, look at that. And some people will be like, well, you should have had headphones off so you can enjoy nature. Yeah, I was listening to the Beatles. I was 16.
Right.
Yeah,
I didn't know, but I will say that that itself brings me to that as I'm looking at mountains and I'm hiking and outdoors, and because I think there's a lot of times that we get to this mentality. It's like, oh, only time anybody talks about being close to God is when they're in a mountain or something. Yeah. It's just like, well, no. I mean, I could be walking down the road and just have. And to me, it's like I could have this aha moment when I listen to certain songs or certain things and go, wow.
Yeah.
There have been times that I've hated the song, and then I've had one of those moments, and suddenly that song now means something.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I actually like this song. And they're like, why do you like this song? I don't know, because of this part right here.
It was associated.
Yeah.
And I know that I'm very musical, but there are times that I hate the whole song except for the one part in the middle of the bridge that completely does something amazing, and it's like, oh, and that was just like, bam.
Yeah.
And then I like the whole song.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying all that because it's one of those things that I could be anywhere. We're talking about monuments, seeing a rock and going, oh, look at the magnificence. That's like I hear the tonal part of the harmony and how God created harmony and melody and all these things. Because to me, music is, there's so many intricacies of just tones and of course these musicians working together to create these different harmonies and instruments and different timbres that creates this canvas of audio bliss, and you sit there and go, that's amazing. And regardless of what type of music you like, there's a certain reason why you like that music. You know, I can't stand listening to country music. Some people can. Casey, that's not me. You know, but there is a reason why Casey listens to that and what that creates in the timbre and the tones. But I can sit there and go, listen to that harmony, listen to that, and there's like, oh, I'm not a huge barbershop quartet guy, but man, when those guys sing, oh,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
I don't want to listen to it all day.
But you can appreciate it for
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah, but I also look at music as if this is a gift from God, the way that this is created, and the fact that we can take that and just create
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
You know,
Endlessly, really.
endlessly. Unless you're in the music industry today, then you do the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
But yes,
Especially Christian music.
Think out of the box.
well, don't get me going on Christian. So, anyways,
Yeah.
I was just thinking of that because I was thinking that these moments are not just when you're walking through a mountain
Right.
or you have
Right.
a stream going.
Yeah. Now that you say that, I actually when we moved up to Fremont, Anthony came early to unload. I think I told you this at the time. I don't know if you remember.
Oh,
but
yeah.
you came early with the truck to unload
Yes.
at the house, and I came later with Bennett. And the whole drive here, I was just like this anxious mess. Like, we're moving. I have this tiny baby with me. I know this is where you're taking us, God, but I'm kind of mad right now. You disrupted my whole life. And there's a succession of songs on the radio that each one was like this buildup of like, I know that God is with me right now. And the lyrics in this song right now are like exactly what I needed to hear to give me peace to move forward. And by the time I made it to Fremont, I was like, okay, I feel more settled. I know that God is here. I know this is where he wants me. But I had to then sit and write them all, the names of the songs down so that I could remember that succession.
Now, when you hear those songs
And now when I hear them, I'm like, this is one of them that was,
yeah,
yeah.
that's what I was talking about. You sit there and you go,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've none of that. Like, not at all.
You're not a music guy.
I'm not a music guy. Like, honestly, Paul, as you were talking about going on, walking and listening to that one cassette, I'm thinking of me when we were in Lincoln and you were working and I was preparing to take classes. I was preparing to go to seminary and I had to pass these entrance exams to get into seminary. And I still remember, I can tell you where I was when I was listening to the conversation on communion from the seminary professor, or the conversation like
Basically a podcast.
basically a podcast, but it was a class. Like, he was teaching a class, and it was on their iTunes U page. But yeah, like music that doesn't do, like, I don't connect anything really with music other than some musicals that I was in. Like, that's the only music that I connect with. But that's just, I'm wired very differently.
Well,
And that's okay.
But everybody's different.
Yeah.
And that's what actually the bigger point I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
Is that because I do feel like every time we talk about God, it's like, oh well, if you're not in a mountain, breathing in the air,
Right.
it's just like, well, only God's in the mountain. So
Well, I
Gotta
mean,
go there.
there's a reason that we call it the mountaintop experience. Jesus himself had mountaintop experience. Moses had mountaintop experiences.
correct.
But that's like the beauty of monuments in the way that kind of we're using that is they can actually transport you back to those. And again, it doesn't have to be in a mountaintop, but they can transfer you back to those places so that you can feel it, not just talk about it, but actually feel like you're there again and be grateful to God for that time, for what he was doing in that time.
Somebody this weekend said she was the musician, and she was asked to come play some hymns for a woman who was dying in the hospital. And she says now every time she hears like the beep of the machines in the hospital, she's transported to that room, because she said that moment for her, like she just felt God's presence in the hospital room with this dying woman. And every time she hears the beep, like she remembers that God was with her in that moment. So it's just like, that doesn't seem like a mountaintop experience, being with somebody dying in the hospital. But for her, that is a very vivid reminder of God's presence in her life. So it can be something like that. Maybe it's
because God's presence in your life, when you feel that, sometimes it is when you're in the hole, and you're just like, as you were saying, you were driving, you were anxious, you're sitting there going, my whole life is changing. I'm about to. I just have this new baby. What are we doing? And then God was like, hey, by the way, I'm with you.
I'm still here.
You big jerk.
But yeah, it doesn't, it can be, I mean, you could be sitting somewhere eating pizza. Like, it doesn't matter where, but you know, you're sitting somewhere eating pizza, and now anytime you order that pizza, you're taken back to that that one moment or whatever. Like, so those are, again,
well, and I'm going to put myself out there. So there are times in certain movies that a character will portray a characteristic that I look at as a godly characteristic, either a sacrifice or if it's some sort of, you know what I mean? And those moments in those movies, and usually you could probably name them, that actually gets me like teared up, because you see these things like, you know, this actor, this adult pretender, I'm sorry, did I say that loud? On screen portraying this thing that you sit there going, but that is this, what this character is doing is what, you know, God, how he would treat us, or how this would be, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I know I think about it too much but there are times in the movie that I'm sitting there and I'm like, that is a visualization of that love or that sacrifice, or, you know, I'm not sure if that makes sense, but I'm such a nerd. You're like,
that too. Well, I do that too. My kids are like, why are you crying again? I'm like,
just leave me alone.
There's just more to it than that. Just go with it.
But I just like going back to, again, whatever it is, but just that whatever you can think back to is what you're grateful for, especially if you can start making a list of those things and just give them, you know, just simple titles that for you take you back to that place. But like, as I was reading through this and I was thinking through it, the first thing that popped in my head and stuck in there was right after COVID started here in Nebraska. I remember we were out at the lake, and then I spent all afternoon on the phone, and the next morning, I'm sure I didn't sleep well that night. I don't remember, but the next morning I was up early before everybody else by myself. I went outside, and it was just the calmest morning in terms of wind. Like, the lake was like glass, and the sunrise,
I had that moment.
The sun came up, and it just was like, okay, that was for me. You were driving it. For me, it was I'm still here. I still got you. I'm still in control. This is God speaking, not me, by the way. God saying that to me, and it just was like, that's the moment that I have, like, when I think of all of them, that's the one that gives me the most, because we had no idea. I mean, we had no idea what was going to come those next 2 years. But
it was 2 weeks.
It was 2 weeks to flatten the curve.
Came up, Stacy, we're taking an extra week for spring break, and I think I flipped out on you. Another week, 2 weeks of spring break? No way.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because I had no idea what's going on. And of course, at that point, we were sitting there going, "Oh well, I'll make a couple videos."
Yeah.
So we recorded these songs all together in like a live thing.
Well, we had this big press conference with a couple church, us, the St. Pat's, Bergen leaders, Midland, Fremont Public, like all of these school and community leaders got together in a small room, had all these conversations. Three Rivers was there, had all these conversations, went on to say, this is what we're going to do. You know, it was on the news. None of us even, like, there was no consideration for like, should we not be in a big room together? Should we wear masks? It was just like, no, we just got to shut it down for 2 weeks and then we'll be fine. And it was like months later before we like thought maybe we shouldn't all like cram into a tiny room together. Maybe we should actually try and do these virtually. And like, it just was, whatever. But going back to that sunset or that sunrise, like still now, whenever we're out there and if I'm up early, like I just watch for that sunrise and go, yep, that takes me back. But that's that reminder that God is in control. That was him speaking that to me. And then I just, like, that's a pure sense of peace. Because it's not me in control, it's him in control. And just talking about it now, like I feel it. But to be able to I put about 7 different things in my list just today of here are times that I can think back to, and they're all different feelings. One was jumping off a cliff at the Ozarks and just sense of thrill and excitement, and like that was just
dying.
Like I still I remember jumping off the cliff and yelling, "Oh my goodness!" And then I looked down and I went, I still got a long way to go before I hit the water. Like that, I can visualize all of that, and but just like I've never felt adrenaline or excitement like that. I was trying to impress a girl, and I got the girl. Failed yeah. And so, but like,
did it work?
That wasn't the moment, but it was really fun.
It was. I'll never do it again. But it sure was.
He's not really
fun.
much of a thrill seeker, so sometimes I just gotta encourage him to seek the thrill.
You know, I jumped out of a plane.
Yeah.
And the whole time I wasn't going, oh my goodness. I was like, please don't throw up. Please don't throw up. I'm going to throw up on this guy. It's going to go all over his face. That was like the only thing I could think of because I was sitting there going, I'm going to throw up everywhere.
This is terrible.
But like, I went through about 7 and then I just sat like, so then the next step in this gratitude journey is to just 5 minutes. Just sit and relive some of those. Just close your eyes and relive them. And then the goal is, phase 2 is a 30-day joy exercise. So 3 times a day, first thing in the morning, sometime in the middle of the day, last thing before you go to bed. Just do that 5-minute gratitude exercise. And they said basically somewhere in there, in the midst of that 30 days, something will switch in you. To the point where now you'll feel weird. It'll be abnormal when your joy meter, quote, is low in your life.
Joy meter.
Joy. Yeah, they didn't use joy meter, but like
That's your phrase.
When your joy levels are low. Yes, not feeling joy will feel abnormal to you.
I think we've talked about this a long time ago, like the gratitude practices of gratitude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this just has
brain
science behind it.
These are different ways, though.
Yeah.
Like we didn't talk about those ways of practicing gratitude.
All right. So now I'm going to go to the cynical side of this because I have to. We have to bring it up. In your sermon, you brought up that, this building is a monument to God's greatness.
Mm-hmm.
I've always had this whole entire notion in my head that we as a Christians in the nation, whatever, or in the world, build these huge monuments of churches, especially these ones in Europe that are huge and just bazillion dollars for all these different things, maintain all this other stuff. Is that really a monument to God, or is that a monument to us?
Our abilities to build.
Is it the is it Tower of Babel all over the world?
No, the Tower of Babel was, yeah.
You got to understand one of my questions.
Right. No, that's a very legitimate question. How's it being used? But is it necessary? Is it necessary? No. I mean, you got people in Africa worshiping under trees. That's their place of worship. Can it be prohibiting to worship? Yeah. One, it can be prohibiting from people even wanting to come in because they've been burned by, like it built its physical walls. It also can be prohibiting for Christians to go out into the world because it's kind of like this, we even call it's a sanctuary. It's a place that's other, it's separate from the world. But like the most beautiful temple, the most beautiful building ever built, God commanded, Solomon to build this and gave him very specific, and it was incredibly beautiful. And when the second one was built, that was also awesome. The old people were like, oh, it's not as nice as the last one. And so like there's,
I think that
God wants,
I think that was a different purpose then, because that was built for his home, for his where you put the tabernacle and all that. Once Jesus came, did that become necessary anymore?
It didn't. Well, the Holy of Holies was not necessary anymore because now we could go directly to Jesus. We don't need a priest to do that for us. But we're still encouraged to gather together. Now, early church model was probably more like they were gathering together in houses, and that probably a lot of what would now be called micro churches, just people gathering in houses and then going out and doing service and things like that. Is the church building a necessity for worshiping God? No. Can it be? Should it be used in a way that is beneficial to God's kingdom? Yes. And I think most churches use it in that way. Yes. Now, I wouldn't say that I can't say that for everybody. But there is, just logistically, there needs to be a place for people to meet. So
in terms
good.
of the monument representing, this is a place where we see God at work. The church is a monument in that aspect. God's work is done here. We can meet with him here.
Yeah.
This is a place where we see his presence.
Yeah, and it's
so not that we worship, like
we don't worship the building.
We don't worship the building. The building itself may not signify anything.
Some people do.
Some people do. Yeah, but
I'm not being
Yeah.
just being cynical.
yeah.
But if that's how you were meaning monument, was this?
It's a place that the definition that I used for monument is something that can be used when someone looks at it and goes, "What's that? What's the purpose of that?" You can tell of God's deeds because of that. Like it points you towards what God has done. I think churches should be pointing people towards what God has done. But yeah, you can always outdo. You can go over, not outdo. You can go overboard, and say we want the biggest, coolest, prettiest church, or the most modern church, or the most stained glass, or the biggest organ, or the brightest flashing lights, because we want people to see us and how great we are.
Well, okay, so one of the most famous chapels of that is probably the 16th chapel, correct? Mm-hmm. One of the ones that we can think of. And you go in. I've never been there, but the mural on the ceiling, is a representation of God. I don't know what he would say. I'm not an art guy. I'm a music guy.
Yep.
So I guess the question is like, okay, is that extravagant, or is that actually? Because the art and the ability to do that was given by God.
Yeah.
And it was a representation of this, who painted that?
Michelangelo.
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 Is it?
Yeah.
I think so.
Just the way you said it was sorry.
Well,
I
I'm
thought that
saying
you were saying it funny, but you weren't, and I'm sorry that I laughed.
Oh, okay. I just thought, okay, yeah, no, you're fine.
yeah. So I mean, so Michelangelo's interpretation of God, and so but sometimes I see some of these huge buildings and go, what a waste of money.
Yeah.
You know, and we could be doing more with that, especially when you sit there and go, well, we as a church are supposed to be helping the widows and the orphans, and here we are building this building that's like 5 billion feet tall, and it can hold 300 people.
Yeah.
You know, and you're like,
Right.
okay,
Yeah.
why is this here?
Well, the same was true of the temple, though, and how extravagantly they built the temple.
But that was ordered.
Well, yes, but it was also an act of worship for the people in building it, especially this. Yeah, because they said we have more than you've given too much. We have more than we possibly could use to build this. Your gifts are so extravagant, and part of that I think was, there for sure were some wrong intentions with it, but a lot of it was God has given me so much, and I'm giving this back. And if it is given in worship, then yeah, maybe it's more extravagant than it needs to be. But if that art is his way of honoring God and thanking him for the abilities that he's given him.
And we also believe that when we gather and worship, that is God's house, right? That is God. Even though it's not the temple, it's not the only place that he resides. He's everywhere because of Jesus and the Spirit. But that is God's house, and he welcomes us into his house. And so it's the place where he has promised to meet us. And so it's not that because Jesus died in the temple and the temple curtain was torn in two, that now there's no need for temples. There's no need for church buildings. But yeah, we don't.
I think it's the intention. Is our intention in making this so fancy so that people will come and say, wow, you did a good job building this? Or is our intention, we want a bigger space that can hold more people so more people can come and worship God together?
Yeah, okay.
So I'm kind of lean with you. Like, do we really need all these fancy
I look at
things?
Trinity and I sit there and go, okay, the way that it's designed is not really, it's pretty, but it's not extravagant.
Right.
And it's really designed for a school. You have
The whole building. Yeah.
the whole building is just designed for that whole entire
The flow.
environment.
Yeah.
The sanctuary part of it is not. It's pretty.
It's not gaudy.
You walk in, it's functional. You can hold people, you can do stuff, but it's not like, well, I can't see the ceiling because it's so high,
Right.
and that's a monument.
It's not laced in gold or. Yeah.
Well, but so and there's several churches that are like that. I'm not saying that all of them are like that, because there's small little country churches that are just what they are. They're building 4 walls and there's some pews and that's it. Maybe an office.
Yeah.
And so, I'm not just talking about like Nebraska. I'm just talking about churches that you might see online or whatever, and it's just like, wow, that holds 300 people and it's the size of Nebraska. It's just like, why is it so big?
Yeah.
But I digress.
I think, again, anything can be used well. Anything can be used poorly, or done poorly. And you could build a building that the money would have been better spent elsewhere.
Or just building a building for the sake of building a building.
Yeah.
Well.
Or
Why not?
putting all the little intricacies in the building that really don't affect people or worship. It's just, now we can say we have a koi pond baptismal font because with water and koi brought in from Jerusalem, like that sort of thing.
They're koi in Jerusalem.
I don't know.
But I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I also, there's a lot of times that this is probably the real cynical part of me, is like when somebody built it and it's like, well, I gave you the money for that, so therefore I want my name on it.
Yeah.
And
And
it's just-
That's not the point.
That's one of the things that I love this is before me, but we at Trinity, the plaques are not there. And that was from the very beginning. We're not, if this is given for God's work, it is here for God's kingdom.
Yeah.
It is not here to commemorate
this individual. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or whomever.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that is where I get to a hard time going. What is this for? Is this for God or is this for this person so they can put their name on it?
Yeah.
So anyways, I didn't really want to go down that path, but it was the one thing in the sermon that stuck out. I'm still going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I could
about the
see
building.
why we have churches. I'm not saying they're not necessary,
Right.
but I'm wondering as a Christian nation throughout the world, are we extravagant?
Yeah. That's a really good question, dude. And something to always keep in mind.
I've always thought
As
too,
we-
like we fill these big churches on Sundays, and some of them just sit empty all
Yeah.
week too. So I'm always thinking, like, how
Which is
else
the
can
reason.
we use this?
Well, which is the reason
space?
why. I mean, as a businessman, I had this rule, but that's why Trinity is what it is. The fact that
Right.
it is a school as
Yeah.
well.
It's used, yeah.
It's used. It's being used, and during the summer, it's being used. It's something's going on there. We might have education stuff, and yeah, there might be times that you have classes here and there at night.
Yeah.
But yeah, majority of the time, the church is empty, and you're like,
Yeah.
okay, so we spend all this money on a building that is filled 1% of the time, and it's being used. Whereas I could just, build a room like this.
Yeah.
And it's like I can work out of here, because if I'm supposed to be out there in the world, go in the world,
Yeah.
So I got to bring it up because that is probably one of the top five things that if anybody was going to criticize the church for, what would be the use of money and their cathedrals and their
Yeah. And not just even outside inside the church. Yeah.
supposed to be good stewards of the money, but
Yeah.
is that
But it's automatically, if I start talking about stewardship and I start, oh, here he goes again. He wants more money. He like that greed in the church. And I there's legitimate reasons that people hear pastors start to talk about money and tense, and they tense up because there are lots out there who have squandered, wasted, embezzled money, and that gives a bad name to others who
We'll use it.
will use it well. But I've my last congregation, when we there were lots of we would see lots of churches pop up in the area in storefronts, and they'd be there for a year, and then that pastor would move on. And as I was seeing that, I was asking questions, and that seemed very common that a pastor would come in to that area, promise lots, raise money, and then leave town,
disappear.
and go do that in a different place. And so you have this community who's on fire, who wants to see God work, and they hear this and they get excited and they give, and then all of a sudden this guy who promised everything is gone with the money. There are legitimate reasons to be concerned when money gets talked about. Now, there shouldn't be, but there are.
Okay, I don't want to end this podcast on this note.
Yeah.
Because we started off with the idea of as you defined it, a monument is a place, or as we kind of talked about, a thing like music, or you were talking about a reading or a lesson of a biblical passage that you were whatever brings you closer to God is really what we're talking about,
Yep.
or at least reminding you of the greatness of God.
Yes.
And so I don't want to leave this podcast talking about the
Yeah.
church buildings and how
Right.
So I guess my monument is the is music itself, the actual. I mean, regardless of style or whatever, it's just the fact that it exists.
Yeah.
To me, that is one of the biggest monuments that I can look at and go, that is the greatness of, that is because God created that.
Yeah.
And it was there for us to use so we can worship him.
Yeah.
Of course, I do that every Sunday with really bad Christian songs, but
but that's the other piece of the monument that we haven't talked about today, but that I talked about on Sunday is it's not that monument, or at least not all of them. Some should just be for me, but monuments in the Old Testament weren't just for Jacob or Joshua or Samuel. They were for the next generation. They were for the world to know of God's goodness. So, and speaking of even though they can be cheesy, but like using music as a monument is not only for you, it's a way that you then can spread the awesomeness of God to those around you.
Well, this is the reason why you can listen to Bach or listen to Mozart and hear those. I mean, I'm trying to think of the ethereal music, not just notes and the specific songs, but just the idea of music.
Emotion.
Well, just the idea of music, how that works, just to get down to science, the frequencies and all work and how they all mesh together and what does this and blows my mind.
Yeah.
It's as magical as light to me. It's just like, it's just there, and birds singing. And they sing in harmony with each other, and you're just like, that's amazing. And the wind blowing behind, and you're, and
Yeah,
that to me is a representation of God and what He created in the world.
Yeah.
The mountain, you look at the mountain. Does your strength come from a mountain? No, strength comes from God. I'm sorry, but I mean, you look at the mountain as that monument. So. Thanks for picking up the ball.
yes, he was tossing it to you.
Though, like having the physical reminder for me is a chance for me to tell other people, like, "Hey, what is that?" Well, let me tell you about my time in the
Tell you a
mountains.
story.
Yeah.
Tell you a
And
story.
my time with God, and how God created the mountains, and God was with me in the mountains, and mountains are great. So it's a chance to tell it too, like for somebody to see it, to ask a question, and there's an opportunity to tell about God in that. So that's why I like a physical monument, but sometimes it is the song, like, oh, I love this song because, and to take the opportunity to tell why this is meaningful to you.
Yeah, and it sounds like to me when you told your story, what I heard from that, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, is that it's actually like the discussion, the deep discussion of God's word was what you were getting into at that point.
Yeah.
Theology.
Yeah, but it's what's awesome about, and that's what, going back to this book that I'm really just trying to wrap my head around. Stacy, you can look at that, Paul, you can just hear music or whatever. I can just see a sunrise, and that encompasses everything, right? That encompasses, like for me, that sunrise encompasses all of God's control in creation. Even when it looks like everything's in pure chaos. One of the other things I love to do, and this is one of my other peace moments is, if you look, when you're in a boat, if you look behind, with this, and you look behind you, there's this wake that the boat makes, but like right in the middle of it at the back, like it comes together at a V, and right behind that is like the calmest water.
That's where you take kids on the tube.
That's where you take kids on the tube. But like, to me, I just see God's what's
the creaking?
Yeah.
It's a boat.
Oh, okay. But God's calm
To a
in the midst.
motorboat. I'm used to the sound of the motor.
Like if I follow the path that God leads, that's where I find the calm in the midst of chaos. So when I'm sitting in a boat and I just look back behind me and I see that one picture in my head encompasses all of that. And not because I have to think through it, but because I can feel it. that's the beauty of these little monuments, whether it's whether it's a physical object or not. We can feel a whole sensation. We can feel a whole weekend. We can feel a lifetime of music. We can feel it all in this one sensation, or in this one object, or this one note, or this one visual, and automatically be transported back to that, or automatically be reminded of God's goodness, or his love, or his peace, or his exhilaration, whatever it is. That's why I think the monuments, again, whether they're physical or not, you have to figure out what is most important for you, but also what's best for those around you. But those monuments share a whole lot more than just, a pretty rock.
Yeah. I don't know if there are people who are thinking like, I don't know if I have any of those. Like, I don't know if I have any monuments.
I think that's what everyone's going to say initially. Well, and I shouldn't say everyone. It took me a while to come up with a list, but now, like, as I've been sitting on it longer, I'm like, oh, I need to add that one to this, or oh, I need to add that one to this. And it's amazing how quickly that list can grow. Because it doesn't need to be that mountaintop experience. Where's that normal day where you just felt incredible peace or sheer joy? Happiness is what sheer happiness.
Yeah, but there's times in the day driving, especially coming back from workout early in the morning, sometimes there's the sunrise and the way that it's hit, and especially during the fall when you have the corn stalks and a certain height. I don't know, man. There's beauty that just kind of comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And you're just driving going, I better either pull over or not pay attention to this because I'm going to crash.
Yeah.
But because it's amazing. And those kind of, because you can be on a mountain, you could be in a field of corn, you could be on
You'd be sitting at work.
You could be sitting at, well, I don't know about that. I feel God's presence in this tax return right now.
But even though you're still surrounded by people, sometimes, there's still ways that God can speak even in the midst of tax season.
I think if we can live expecting God to show up too, it makes a difference. Like, you know what, I'm going about my day. I know that God is here with me. Even praying, God, show me yourself in some way today. Maybe it's somebody drops in with chocolate or something while you're at work. You're like, oh, that was a nice, that for me, that would be a nice unexpected, like, oh yeah, God motivated them to give me
Give me chocolate. So for all of you out there,
day, chocolate.
So there you go. Another gift.
Yeah.
I don't need more chocolate.
But
But when you're looking for God, you see him. And when you think back over your life and say, when has God been with me? He will remind you of those times.
So like I said earlier, as you build your gratitude, like gratitude leads to joy. Because then you're more likely even to be able to see gratitude and have joy in the midst of the really, really, really tough parts, because you're able to go back to those and remember, oh yeah, God is in control. Oh yeah, God does love me. Oh yeah, God does care for me. I might not feel it right now, but I know it because I've seen it. And so, yeah, I'm also not telling you to be a hoarder. Like, don't be like, oh, I had a great meal. I need to take home 40 napkins from this, or matchbook, whatever.
That's what people used to collect.
Yeah. But like, so you don't need to keep a physical object from everything that you've ever done, as a reminder. But they can't, some of the bigger ones to have those, or just keep I'm making a list on my phone.
Well, there are people who keep journals.
Yeah.
Keep a journal, keep maybe photographs or something if there's some meaningful places.
Yeah, because all those things are kind of reminders of those things.
Yep.
But I know I'm not much of a journaler, but I can imagine that would be something, especially if you look back and see the progression of God's influence in your life.
Stacy's got a journal that's like a 5-year journal, but you just go back to January 1 every year. And so like you've done it for a year and a half now. So in 3.5 years, she'll be able to see, well, what day is today? On June 14th, the last 5 years, here's what June 14th looked like. And so to be able to go back,
so you always
and
go
it's only
back.
like,
Yeah.
so it's one page is June 14th, and it has 5 sections, one for each year.
You just don't write.
So
it
there are
down.
like 4 or 5 lines. So I mean, I want to journal more. This was a good way for me to get started because it's
very
4 or
short.
5 lines. It's short. I'm not sitting down and writing out this huge long pages of what we did today and what I learned. It's like the highlights. So now I can go back. Like one of our activities this last weekend was tell us your journey from the last year. So this was a starting point for me to go back and see, here's what we did day to day, but here were the big things too. So, and it was interesting now that I have another year to see, oh, that's what we were doing last year. And now I can see like God's hand in these. Some days it was just like, oh, we played outside. But there were the days where God really used that. And I didn't know at that point. But now a year later, I can see God at work in that. So,
I have in my little notes in my phone, I have what I right here, prayer list. It's just, months and months and months and months of, and I have a little checkbox that you can't see it, but near prayer.
Yeah.
But I can go back.
Yeah.
And I can see, oh, well, I can see how God
Answered that. Yeah.
answered that, or, because it's just months and months, and it's just one of those things because it's never ending on this notepad thing. I can just keep on adding and go back, but it's the same concept.
Yeah.
You'll be able to go back and say, oh man, a year ago, I was praying for this. And of course, I don't have specifics. I just have a name. I just might have
Right.
and so I can go, oh yeah, I remember that. And I remember how that resolved, or it hasn't resolved yet. I should put that person back on, or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's the
fun
same.
to have a record. Yeah.
Well, it's just the same concept of this journal.
Yeah.
I wish I journaled.
Well, that's why I started this. Like, it's less intimidating, but it's still is a record of what happened and what God is doing and who I am at this moment and who our family is. And
One of the things that I was just thinking of as a musician, if you're a musician, you ever played in a band and you ever just jammed, there are times that like everything just kind of comes together and it's just like, I would call this an otherworldly kind of, you're just like, whoa, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
And everything's gelling and and it's those type of moments are very far and few because you jam a lot, but when you're really kind of in we call it in the zone or in the groove or whatever, in the pocket, and it is something else. And to be able to experience that, because that is not something I can go back to. I don't have a recording of it. I don't have do you ever have that?
But you have a feeling of it.
A feeling of it.
Yeah.
But again, I've already expressed why I feel like,
For you, it's music.
Music is God is in music, all music.
Yep.
I mean, there are sometimes that people pervert the music, but yes.
Yeah.
still there.
Yeah.
Just like, Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, man, it is late.
It's
We
time.
talked a lot.
We did.
Talked a lot.
All right, Stace, since you've made space,
I've made space.
would
I
you
know
close
how to
us
pray.
in prayer?
Sure. God, we thank you for this time together to talk about who you are, how you work so intricately in our lives and so intimately in ways that are meaningful to us, Lord. We thank you for the ways that you show up, that you remind us of your presence, of your goodness, that we are yours and you're taking care of us, Lord. Please help us to open our eyes to see you at work every day, to remind us of the ways you've been faithful in working in our lives in the past. Lord, may we rest in you, knowing that you are holding us, that you're taking care of us, and that we are your beloved children, Lord. And that is our purpose in this life, Lord, to know who you are, to proclaim to others who you are. Help us to rest in your presence and to remember that you take care of us always. Amen.
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 All right.
Go team.
Are we good?
Yeah.
All right. So contemplate. I can't say it.
Here, I'll start the
Contemplate?
sentence. Contemplate.
Yeah. Your monumental. I mean, things that are
Yeah.
monumental.
Just remember, look for those spaces of gratitude.
Yeah.
Those places where God has done good in your life.
Yeah. Words are hard. All right.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us this week. We pray that the Holy Spirit has used this time to focus you in on the one thing that you can practice this week as you live out your faith in your family and in your community. If you found this helpful, feel free to share it with a friend. If you would like to support the work that God is doing through Trinity Fremont, you can text a donation to 1-844-353-5782, or you can give online at www.trinityfremont.com/donate.